thing I want to point out on this pattern. If you remember what I did on that crystal butt cricket, you'll notice that there's a great deal of similarity between this pattern and the crystal butt cricket. If you learn to tie one of these, you can tie every single one, because the patterns are very similar to each other. The only thing that we're going to substitute in some cases is the material for the wing and the color of the body. So these are very similar patterns. If you learn to tie one, you can tie every single one of them. So let me take this out, put the hook in, and we'll get started on this. Again, this is the same size as the crystal butt cricket. It's a number 8 Teamco 5212. It's a 2X long dry fly hook. Just get that in the vise. I'm going to substitute the color of the thread because this cricket is basically going to be sort of a tan or gray or brown. Attach the thread to the shank of the hook, just as you did with the cricket pattern, and bring it all the way to the rear. And we're going to cut that thread, get that tag end off. And once we get that thread wrap on the shank, I'm going to bring it right back up about 2/3 the length of the hook shank, stop it right there. I'm going to tie in the body material, and I'm going to use two different types of foam to form this body. One is sort of a camel colored or tan foam. That will be the overbody. I've cut a little strip out of this foam that's a little less than 1/4 of an inch in width. The other is a gray closed cell foam. These are both 1/8 inch thick foam sheets here. And I've cut a somewhat thinner piece out of this gray foam. This is going to be used for the underbody. The tan foam will be used for the overbody. The reason I tie it in this color, this tan and gray, is most of the hoppers that I see out west, they're not yellow. They're either tan, gray, some have white underbodies, others have olive underbodies. And I really prefer these colors for tying hoppers that I'm going to fish out west, although I do see a lot of these colors back east too. So now we've got our two strips of foam cut for the body. The first one I tie in is going to be the tan foam. That's going to form the overbody of the fly. So we'll just tie that in at this point about 2/3 up the hook shank and wrap it all the way to the rear. And tie it down firmly at that point. I'm going to rib this fly just as I did with that crystal butt cricket. And to do that, I'm going to use a thread that's going to complement the color of the fly. Again, I prefer a good broad G thread. You can use a gray or a light tan or dark brown. It doesn't make any difference. Cut a piece of that. Tie this in right at the rear. Tie it down tight. You're not going to cut this foam. It's pretty tough stuff. Tie that in. Now I have to tie in the foam that I'm going to use to form the underbody wrap. What you want to do with this foam is to prep it first. If you try to tie it in the way it is here, it's going to be very difficult. I'll take this foam and stretch it a little bit. You notice how it turns shiny. And I like that because if you take a hopper and turn it over and look at the body's not dull. It's shiny. It's almost like it's been painted with an enamel paint. And this is going to give that effect that I'm looking for. I'm going to take that foam, stretch it a little bit, and sort of trim the end off there where I was holding it. Tie this foam in right at the rear. So I've got my two pieces of foam and my piece of thread tied in that I'm going to use to rib the body. Bring that thread right back up to the front. Then simply wrap this foam to form the underbody. It's going to give me a real nice shiny underbody. Sort of overlap those wraps when you make them. You wind up with a beautiful little underbody on this fly. I kind of lost it there. Just go back, rewrap it. Hold it firmly in place because it will have a tendency to slip on you if you don't. Tie it down good and cut the excess foam off. Now just fold this foam forward. Keep your thread over on the opposite side of the hook shank away from you. Fold the foam forward And again, do not stretch this foam. Don't stretch the overbody foam. Tie it down. And trim away the excess. And wrap that well. Now we're going to rib the fly. Just take your thread, make 4 or 5 wraps. Again, sort of take your index finger of the other hand and hold that foam in place. Bring the thread over, tighten it down. Only takes about 4 or 5 wraps of thread to rib this body, and you get that nice segmented appearance of the hopper. You notice that's very similar to the body that we did on that crystal butt cricket. Tie it off. Get that ribbing thread out of the way. Make sure that's tied down nice and tightly at the front there. Okay, you're ready for the next step. Okay, we've got the body tied down in the front. Now it's time to put on the legs. Because in the West, most of these hoppers are sort of a dark color, I'm going to use a dark brown. This is again that round rubber leg material. I'm just going to split 2 pieces off, keep them together, just take them off the whole strip of legging material there. Now, tie these down, bring your thread up a little bit more toward the eye of the hook so you've got room to work. Tie your rubber legs in. Remember, don't separate them until you tie them in. Give that a few wraps. Tie them down nice and tight. Then again, you can bring the legging material back, cut the legs a little bit longer than the body of the fly. So we've got 2 legs tied in, but they're not separated yet. Take the point of your scissors or needle or whatever's handy. Separate those legs. Again, we're going to do a figure 8 wrap. The thread goes behind this leg that's opposite to you, under the body of the fly, and then behind this leg. Now the thread's in position so that you can tie them both in. Just sort of hold this leg over on the lateral part of the fly, tie it down, hold the other one in, give it a wrap. See how nicely that does? You couldn't ask for a better technique than that to tie these round rubber legs in. You can do them separately, but you're going to get into some trouble with it. Okay, bring that thread right back to the start of the body. So the thread now is sitting right at this point. Now we're going to put the winging material in. In this case, I just use natural elk hair. You don't want a great deal of it. This fly is going to float fine because it's got all this foam on it. So be a little sparing with the elk hair. Cut out a little piece. Don't need much more than that. Again, just as you did for the cricket, even up the tips in your hair stacker. Put it in by the tips. Tap that on the table. You can hold that in place with this finger if you want, so it doesn't flop around on you. Again, pull the hair out by the tips. It's going to be pointing in the direction in which you want to tie it in. Then you can grab it with your right hand, bring it up, lay it right down on the top of the fly. You want the tips of the wings to extend a little beyond the butt of the fly. So hold it with the left hand. Again, make a couple of loose wraps. Then you can tighten it down. And we trim away this excess. You can hold these wings down while you trim so it kind of keeps them out of the way. Trim that excess off, kind of get it off your thread there. Notice I've trimmed it at sort of an angle. That way it's going to tie down nice and neatly. Once we get those trimmed, just take your thread, tie down the butt. Next step is to put on the overwing material. For that I use turkey. You can either use tail feather or wing feather. Looks like this. And I always treat my turkey or any feather that I'm going to tie a wing with by spraying it with a fixative of some sort. I like to use that artist fixative that they use on charcoal or pastel drawings. Spray it good, let it dry. It'll keep these fibers together nicely. adjust the size of the wing for the size of the fly. Just take your scissors, find the point, just strip out a section of that turkey quill and cut it. Now to do this wing, and I do this with all of mine, I don't tie it in by the thick part. I tie it in by the thinner portion here. It's going to lay down a lot better, and it's going to give you a much nicer wing when you're through. So take the thin part, the part that's tapered out like this, hold that, place your winging material over the top of the fly, and hold it down in position with your thumb. Then you can tie it off, again with a couple of gentle wraps, and then tighten it on down. Now just take your scissors, bring that up, trim that wing just about even with the tips of the elk hair. If you want to, you can come in, sort of clip these corners off and give it a little rounded shape. And then trim away this front portion. Now we can tie the whole thing down. Some good thread wraps. Now again, just as we did with that cricket, I'm going to take a little dubbing material and I'm going to dub a little head up here. Doesn't matter what color you use, tan, gray, brown. This is a nice color for this. We'll just use a little of this sort of cinnamon colored dubbing. Take some of that. Put that on the thread. Again, I prefer the fine dubbing for this because it just wraps down so nicely. I like to use this dubbing because it's going to form a good base for the head. And when I put that disc on to form the head, it's going to give something for the thread and the disc to bite into, and it's not going to slip forward on you. So now we've just dubbed a little head on this, and I'm going to stop the thread, notice, again at this point right here, about halfway between the eye of the hook and where I've tied in that winging material. Just as in the crystal butt cricket, I'm going to form the head with a foam disc. You can use either the light tan or the dark in either case. I'm going to try to match the body of the fly with the head material, the color. So we'll take some of this tan, again this is a 3/8 inch disc, put it right down in position, again with the disc pointing just over the eye of the hook, a couple of gentle wraps, then you can tighten down on it, give it a half a dozen more. If you're worried about this head slipping forward, when you get through with this fly, you can simply put a little drop of Zap-A-Gap or some kind of cement underneath it, and it'll hold it in position very nicely. Whip finish it. And get rid of your thread. Now I said I like eyes on flies. In this case, I'm going to put eyes on, but I'm going to use this easy shape sparkle body in black. I really think that eyes help. It gives those fish something to key in on. Rotate the fly sideways. Put a little drop of this. Sometimes this stuff doesn't want to come out too easily. You might have to work with it a little bit. One eye here and one eye there. And there's our little western hopper. I call it a western hopper, but believe me, it's going to work back east too, because most of the hoppers you see are not yellow. They're either tan, gray, olive, what have you under the body. It gives a nice segmented body, nice shiny appearance underneath it. I've fished this hopper all over. Out west, back east, doesn't seem to make any difference. So that's our little western hopper. Very easy to tie, very similar in procedure to the crystal butt cricket.